Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. Today I want to talk to you about some very common bourbon myths and help you understand why they might not be what they seem. Let's start off with one of the more common ones. Bourbon is named for Bourbon County. Now this is an interesting one because realistically the name bourbon and its origin is probably just lost to time. However, the story goes that Limestone, Kentucky is a port town and it was part of Bourbon County. And they would ship the whiskey on these rafts from Limestone down to New Orleans. It would take about 6 months or so. And during that time, the whiskey was aging in the barrel. So by the time it got down to New Orleans, people were asking for the red whiskey that comes out of the barrels that say Bourbon County on them, thus bourbon. Now, that makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of a cool story, except there's a historian named Michael Veach, and he kind of puts out there that at the time where all of this was supposedly happening, Limestone wasn't actually even part of Bourbon County anymore. It was actually part of Mason County for about 30 years at that point. So it's very unlikely that any of those barrels would have had Bourbon County on it. In fact, he basically says it's probably more likely named after Bourbon Street in New Orleans, which makes way more sense to me because they probably consume quite a bit of it. So let's go on to age. Many people believe that bourbon has to age for at least 2 years. However, only straight bourbon has to age for 2 years. And if you're within that 2 to 4 year range, you need to put an age statement on it. This is why you'll see things like 36 months because, 36 is a much bigger number than 3 years. So as soon as whiskey touches that new charred oak barrel, it can be considered bourbon as long as it has 51% corn in it. So that's why things like the clear PBR whiskey here probably could have called itself a bourbon, but I am guessing they didn't want to fight that fight and they were making enough of a splash with their 5 seconds aged. So let's talk about origin. Evan Williams or Elijah Craig being the person who created bourbon. Now let's think about this. Do you really think a single person was responsible for creating bourbon, even if they were mimicking what Ireland had been doing or Scotland had been doing? I don't think so. And not just I don't think so. What you'll notice is that there is absolutely zero evidence to support this other than pervasive marketing that's entered both magazines and even textbooks. There's no solid evidence that states that either one of these people created bourbon. It's much more likely just a group of people over time who figured it out and kept it going. Either way, I'd like to thank them. So lastly, let's talk about water. Kentucky will have you believe that their limestone filtered water is this magical essence of life that goes into their bourbon and makes it amazing. And I'm sure that some of it's in there, but they also source their water from pretty much wherever they can get it. So it's kind of BS. All right. Anyway, this was a very fun video for me to make. I found myself wondering about several of these items and questioning whether any of them were true. Just so happens that none of them were. Oh well, it was super fun, and I hope, unlike myself, that you guys won't be responsible for perpetuating any of these myths any further. Have a great rest of your night. Cheers.